Welcome to Divisionalysis. So I'm Fog. It's my signing off video, so let's make it a good one. Let's go. First of all, let me start by saying a big thank you from the bottom of my heart to all my subscribers and all the people who made comments on the last video. I didn't think that I was having an impact, and to hear your voices was incredibly warming. And I want to make something very clear. I work full-time in the military. I have a family, and the amount of time that it takes me to edit a video, research a video, put it all together, it was just taking up too much of my time. It wasn't so much the haters, it was just the addition of the negativity in my life reduced the reasons for me to take away from my personal time with my family. So but in light of the outpouring and hearing how much of a difference some of these videos have made for people, I won't say that I won't make another one, but what I am definitely going to do is to take an extended break and spend some more time with my family, and then I will see how it goes. Special shout out to Baz and Jats, who have been with me through the entire journey and have actually talked me back from the edge of giving up a number of times before now. So thank you to those guys, some of the nicest guys I've ever met in my entire life. Shout out to Tux and his encouragement, and for sending along his supporters to show their support for me. I'm going to enjoy watching a lot more of your stuff than making my own. I'm still a supporter, and I enjoy your content. And to Dispatch, who is a lesser known content creator, but every one of you should get along and watch him, because I know that the amount of research that he puts into his work is phenomenal, and I'll continue to communicate with him in the background, talking nerdy Division stuff, but thanks to him as well. Now, as for this video, if this is going to be my last video, then I better make it a good one. So let's try and put everything that I have been showing you to in one unified theory that I've been working to. So we want to kill a red NPC. Question. Weapon A, 40k per bullet, 900 rounds per minute. Weapon B, 60k per bullet, 600 rounds per minute. Which weapon kills the NPC first? If you said weapon A, you are wrong. If you said weapon B, you've probably watched at least one of my videos where I've spoken about the first bullet principle and how a larger bullet damage gives you an advantage at the start. And normally that would be correct. Weapon B would in fact kill the red NPC first because the damage per second for both weapons is equal, but because of that head start, weapon B would win. But you are also incorrect. Here is that graphed as damage over time, as an average. As you can see, the orange line for weapon B is slightly ahead of weapon A, and it would have killed it first, but this is still not correct because the red NPC's health is off the chart. Neither weapon can kill the NPC. Now, for the longest time we've measured damage over time. That's because damage and time are two very important factors in this game. The reason why we want more damage is so that we can kill things quicker, in reducing the time it takes to do so. Damage per second is a rate. And in this video, what I did is I set out to see what the delta was between what we had calculated as far as damage per second is concerned and what we actually got in the real game. And it's only a short window, 16 seconds, but this is actually what that damage looked like. And as you can see, there is a very, very large delta between what we might have calculated as our burst DPS and what we got in the range and what we actually get in game. And there are a number of reasons and factors for this. And that's why I think it's important to separate damage and time in order to work out what those factors are. So we're going to stick with just damage for now. So we have our NPC and we have a FAMAS with 30 rounds. The base damage, bullet damage of the FAMAS is 44,191. Close to weapon A, but more than weapon A when we looked at it. So 30 round magazine. So the first thing that we do in order to increase our damage, just our straight up damage, is we increase the magazine size. Makes perfect sense to go from 30 round magazine with a damage total of 1.325 million. The easiest way is to increase that magazine size. And what we do is we put on an extended magazine of 20 rounds. And that increases our potential damage to 2.2 million. It's still not enough to kill the red NPC. But there's an important exchange that we've made in doing that. So we've already exchanged 10% reload speed for an additional 20 rounds in the magazine. So we've sacrificed some of our time in order to gain more potential damage. Now that seems like a no-brainer. 10% reload speed for what is the equivalent of 66% extra damage in the magazine. But that's not quite true because there is another magazine that we could have put on which gives us an extra 33% magazine size at no cost whatsoever. So what we're actually doing is gaining an extra 10 rounds for 10% reload speed. So in the case of FAMAS, we sacrifice 0.22 of a second to gain an extra 25% total mag damage. Remember that for later. So we've increased our mag size to give us a potential damage of 2.2 million, still not enough to kill a red NPC. So what we do is we add weapon damage. Now we've got 6 red cores available to us and we've got 10% weapon damage on our watch, giving us a total of 100% weapon damage onto our 2.2 million. That's 200% damage, which gives us 4.4 million damage, and we can now kill that NPC. Yay! Okay, if we go back and we graph the results that we've got so far over time, this is what that looks like in the AK versus the FAMAS situation. And the FAMAS with a higher burst DPS will kill that enemy approximately 0.1 of a second quicker. Now it's important to realize that we actually average quite a lot when we're talking about damage over time. And that works for the long term and the large scale, but when you're talking about the short term and the small scale, that actually doesn't quite work. Because we don't deal things in averages, we deal them in packets or quantized amounts, which are called bullets. And this is what that looks like. And if you don't average it, the result that you get is actually different. In this case, the AK actually only trails by less than 0.1 of a second, and that's because of its first bullet damage getting to this point, but then it reaches a point where its larger bullet damage puts it into a window where it could possibly kill the enemy before the smaller bullet damage of the FAMAS could say that it could. And that last bullet gives it an advantage where it will kill more often from that point, actually infinitely more from that same point. If we take this as being the same point, the AK is the only weapon that can say that it can kill with that bullet. And that's why in a lot of cases that last bullet will make a difference. But we're splitting hairs at this point. There are far bigger differences that we need to address. There was a very long way between what we had calculated in the range and what we actually got in real game. So we want to now kill a veteran NPC. We have 200% damage currently with our 100% weapon damage. So what we do is we go to our specialization tree, 15% assault rifle. We're also holding a FAMAS which has 15% assault rifle damage on it. Could have been added earlier, but that's where we're at. And now we choose to take on a Fenris piece which gives us an additional 10% assault rifle damage, taking us to 240% total damage output. Still not enough to kill the veteran NPC. So now we have to dip into another resource as far as damage is concerned. And so now we move to talents. In this case, we're going to take on Vigilance. Now it's a total weapon damage talent, and I think most people understand now that it's a new bucket, it's a new multiplier, it's a unique multiplier to the build, and so now we get 25% of our total damage output. So 25% of the 240% damage that we currently have gives us an additional 60% damage that we've now added to the build's output, and we are now at 300% total damage, which gives us the ability to say, I now can kill a veteran NPC. But now is the time to get into a key point of this video, and that is that we've now introduced a talent to give us 6.62 million total damage output, but that is potential damage. There's nothing guaranteeing us from delivering that damage at this point. And a key point of this video is that damage, or whatever you calculate, is not damage. What you calculate in the fire, or you do in the shooting range, is potential damage. You still have to realize that damage. And the damage that you actually output in game, realization of that damage is a massive multiplication factor that we too little take into consideration. So when we're adding damage, we have all weapon damage, specific weapon damage, and those are, for the most part, unconditional. If your bullet hits the target, that damage will be transferred to the target. Now, as we're adding more damage, we're adding more conditional damage, and in the case of talents, total weapon damage talents, and amplified damage talents, all of those are subject to the realization multiplier of uptime and their applicability. So if it's damage to pulsed enemies, for instance, it's only applicable if those enemies are pulsed. Uptime. In the case of Vigilance, anytime that you take damage, that portion of your multiplication goes to 0. So that amplification, or that multiplication factor that is applied by that talent, is subject to its uptime. If its uptime is 0, the damage that you get from that talent is 0. You also have some talents that are time restricted as well. But at this point, it's also important to talk about the base weapon damage. Now, I don't remember any times where any other content creator has mentioned the fact that base weapon damage is in fact not unconditional. It is subject to optimal range, and I talk about that in my damage and optimal range video. So it is only 100% applicable if you happen to be inside the optimal range of that weapon. And I think it would surprise people how often that base weapon damage isn't actually delivering 100% of what it actually says on the stats sheet. But you can watch those videos and see what that difference can be as distance is increased. In the case of Vigilance, uptime, I've already spoken about it, but it's potential damage, and that's all we've calculated, is its potential damage is to multiply by 25%. But if it's only uptime is 50%, then we're only ever going to realize 12.5% of that multiplication factor. 50% uptime gives us a 12.5% realization, and that leaves us with 12.5% of unrealized damage. Now, subconsciously, we have certainly made the adjustments necessary in most builds in order to realize that. But generally, those realization costs go unaccounted for. In the case of vigilance, it's very easy to increase the uptime of that talent by adding a shield. The shield prevents you from taking damage, increasing the uptime, increasing the realized damage that you will be doing. But we kind of discount what we have sacrificed in order to realize that damage. In the case of a shield, it's a very, very good investment. All we sacrificed was a damage talent as far as our damage is concerned. We could have put on a turret, we could have put on a drone, but we chose to put on a shield instead in order to realize more damage from our main weapon system. It's a good exchange, but we made that exchange nonetheless. We're now at 300% damage, but we want to kill an elite NPC now. And so now we've already used all of our weapon cores, and we've also used a backpack talent. So now we have to dig into chest talents, and we're going to go for the one that provides the maximum. And that is 30% amplified damage. Once again, new bucket, new unique multiplier, and now we get to add 30% damage of our total damage. And that gives us 390% damage output. It's still not enough to kill an elite NPC. Now, just as a quick reminder, here's where the AK would have been. But we're sticking with the FAMAS, 390%, and for the purposes of graphing, I made it easy on myself, and I've just said 400% in round figures output of the system, and that gives us an output for the FAMAS of 8.838 million in damage, where we're at right now. We graph that as an average again, this is what that looks like. As you can see, the FAMAS falls short of the elite, the AK can kill the elite. But just a reminder as well that you shouldn't really average, but it obviously makes things a hell of a lot easier to do so. But if we just focus down until the FAMAS runs out of bullets, this is what it looks like. In quantized amounts where each bullet stacks on top of the other as far as our cumulative damage is concerned. And that's what that looks like, 400% damage. But we want to kill the elite NPC. And so what we now do is we add crit chance, crit damage. Now these are very powerful multipliers due to the factors that they can provide. So 100% crit damage is very easy to come by on a build, and 50% crit chance. But again, what we've done is we've introduced a further damage component which fluctuates wildly. It is subject to realization. And the realization factor or multiplier for crit damage is crit chance. Pure chance. We can alter that chance though. But in this case, what we've done is we've got 50% crit chance, 100% crit damage, giving us a realized output for crit damage of 50%. And because it is a unique multiplier that we've now added to this build, again, it's across our total damage output, which gives us now 600% average damage output. And that's what this looks like. So we're now at 400% base damage, and we've got 50% crit chance and 100% crit damage as an average. Again, if we quantize that, you can see here what I've done is I've done a critical hit, non-critical hit, critical hit, non-critical hit, as if the average was in fact true, but now we've quantized it. So it's a big jump, little jump, big jump, little jump. And if I focus down on this red area where the AK now runs out of damage from its magazine, this is what that looks like. It's more pronounced now. You can see on the AK definitely big jump, little jump, big jump, little jump. And this is what it would look like if the average was distributed in quantized packets, as in the 50% was as if we were flipping a coin, heads, tails, heads, tails, heads, tails, heads, tails, heads, tails, heads, tails. But that's not how a random number generator works. At 50% crit chance, the realization looks like this. It is a cone of potential damage where the realization falls somewhere in between the limits of that cone. If we apply the 50% realization multiplier, it will, over the long term, fall into that mean 50% mark. That's that light blue line behind and the orange line for the AK. It will fall in line with that. But in order to get it to that sort of an outcome, because again, it's going to be sort of an outcome, it's going to be a blur, what actually occurs is you have a distribution curve. So it is entirely possible to reach the bottom of that potential, and it's entirely possible to reach the top of that potential. Extremely unlikely, as in 50 crits in a row or 50 non-crits in a row, highly unlikely. But what you're going to see is that the average distribution over the very long term will fall somewhere in the middle. And if I take one of those standard deviations and apply it across the mean, this is what that looks like. And as you can see, both weapon systems blur into each other. And it's in the extremely long term that this one standard deviation would come out as being the distribution, or the predominant distribution for our crit damage. The very long term. And it's still going to overlap. So it is entirely possible that you can run a mission and the AK will kill every single enemy in that mission faster than what the FAMAS would. That is a very real outcome. When we use burst DPS, it is a rate. It is a rate of damage over time. I think there is some misconception that burst DPS gives you more damage. It doesn't. It absolutely does not. As you can see here, the total damage output possible for the AK is considerably more than what the FAMAS is. What you are calculating with the rate burst DPS is time. And in the case of an elite, the damage is limited. So when the damage is set for a rate that is damage over time, it is only the time that will alter. And in this case, what we can see is that somewhere in this here is where the average will fall. And it's less than 0.2 of a second at the elite level. Now the thing with your rate where the damage is limited, when the damage is lower, then the difference in time is going to be lower as well. So for a veteran, you are talking fractions of a fraction of a second now. And when we talk about a red NPC, so if we're doing a heroic mission, 60% of what you're going to encounter is a red NPC, and the difference between those two weapon systems is now indistinguishable as far as killing those enemies. It's virtually a 50-50 crapshoot as to which weapon system will kill that enemy first, especially when you take into consideration first and last bullet damage principles. And this is one of those exchanges that I want to talk about. We put on 10 extra bullets with our extended magazine at the cost of 0.22 of a second. The difference here is variable for a start, but it is on average 9%. This is the actual benefit that you are gaining from it. So when killing an enemy, the largest enemy other than a named elite in a heroic mission that you're going to encounter is going to be an elite. You're only going to do that around 15% of the time, and the difference there is less than what we chose to sacrifice for an extra 25% total magazine damage. Can you see where I'm... you picking up what I'm putting down? But that's where I'm going to leave that discussion. The FAMAS is a good weapon for reasons that have virtually nothing to do with burst DPS. And in my opinion, burst DPS is the least impactful factor that you could use to determine a weapon's effectiveness. That's where I'm going to leave that. Some of the other factors to consider for weapon selection bullet size. Obviously you get an advantage at the start. You have a larger kill window when it comes to your last bullet, but also a missed bullet from a larger base bullet damage weapon is more costly than what it is for a lower bullet damage weapon system. But that is offset by the fact that when you are missing, the higher RPM weapon, which is generally associated with a lower bullet damage, will miss more bullets than what a lower bullet damage, lower RPM weapon will. Fluctuations can also seem greater or lesser depending on the weapon system that you're holding, because those fluctuations with regards to crit chance occur across the entire magazine. Again, they're offset against the fact that it takes less bullets to kill an enemy with a larger bullet damage weapon, which means that the fluctuations haven't quite eventuated as far as they can across a higher RPM weapon, but the higher RPM weapon will achieve its average faster, or at least it'll appear like it'll achieve its average faster because those fluctuations are compressed. But this is all small potatoes. There are much bigger considerations that we need to get to. So we've gotten to our second realization multiplier, being chance. In this game we can actually alter that chance by adding crit chance. In this particular situation we have 100% crit damage, which allows us to increase our damage, or our potential damage is an 800% damage output. We have 50% crit chance on the build, which allows us on average to realize 50% of that damage, which goes from 8.8 million available times 50% crit chance, which gives us an additional 4.4 million on top of our 8.8 million, taking us to 13.2 million and enough damage on average to kill an elite NPC. Now there is 4.4 million worth of unrealized damage. Unfortunately, when it comes to crit chance and that modifier, or that realization multiplier, we can't access all of that potential. We are capped at 60% crit chance. So there is some damage or potential damage that is inaccessible in this game. But at every single point that we have added damage, we have added realization factors. And that continues every single time we add damage. We have damage to targets out of cover, we have health, armor plate damage, and those are all subject to situation. You are multiplying your potential damage by whether or not you actually are impacting a target that is in cover or out of cover, whether you're impacting their health or their armor. So you will never realize all of that potential unless you can somehow change the situation. And there are ways in this game to actually do that and realize more potential. And the last one is headshot damage. This one is an incredibly powerful multiplier. Every single weapon, or every single assault rifle, has 75% potential damage inbuilt into that weapon system. And for the most part, that damage goes untapped. It wasn't until I recorded all of my statistics across multiple missions that I realized how little I was taking advantage of the potential damage that's available in headshot damage. On average, across a mission, I worked out that I was only doing 8% headshots. Now I say that that is dictated by chance and skill, because not every enemy has a head. So the chance that you are going to encounter the enemy with the head determines whether or not you get any of that potential damage. And then skill and also situation. So skill, I considered myself to be pretty good with my aim. But what it turned out was that I was actually killing 1 in every 3 enemies with a headshot. 8% as opposed to 33% is a very large difference, and that's because I was aiming for center mass, tracking up to the head, and because the last bullet was multiplied by a headshot damage multiplier, it's exactly the same as the last bullet principle for the AK. The large bullet damage on that last bullet means that it enters a window where it can possibly kill the enemy more often than a non-headshot would. So I'm much more likely to kill with a headshot than I am with a non-headshot. And so there is an amazing amount of untapped potential damage that's stored within headshot damage. And that's going to come back. But every single time we're adding damage, it is a fluctuation of damage within a potential damage cone and can be incredibly variable. Here I've got an example of a FAMAS with striker stacks, vigilance active, they're doing a headshot, the target is out of cover, and it is a critical hit every time. So this is the damage over time difference between having no buffs and having all of those buffs. That is where most of our damage is going, is into the variability. The striker stacks take time to build up. They degrade over time. Vigilance is only active when we haven't taken damage. Headshots determined by chance and our skill to get the headshot. Whether the target is out of cover is situational in most cases, and whether or not it's a crit is dictated by chance. Massive variation. Now we get to my favorite realization multipliers, and they're my favorites because I think that they get talked about the least. And I think the reason why they get talked about the least is because we have to make exchanges of potential damage in order to improve them. Two of these I've already spoken about at length in some of my previous videos. The first is duration. Now this isn't a new concept for my subscribers. I spoke about this in this video as well as the previous one, even made a bubble build based almost solely on duration. But that relationship I think I've established as being one where when you are taking damage or you've taken too much damage, your realization, your ability to realize that damage becomes either very restricted or completely limited, preventing you from doing your full potential. And I've spoken about ways in which you can lengthen the amount of time that you have available to do damage, extend the duration. Most people just simply take the option of a shield and they've got enough skill and confidence in their gameplay that that is enough of a trade-off of potential damage to ensure duration. Now the second realization factor will also not come as a surprise to my subscribers. But that realization factor is frequency. Now I spoke about this at length during this video and its previous video, made a build based solely on frequency, and I hope that by now I have firmly established the relationship between damage and frequency, being that the more often that you can do your damage, or your potential damage, equals more damage. But this time I'll use an example. We'll go back to the gameplay clip where I've actually recorded the damage over the time. And then we'll apply a simple exchange and see what occurs. So we have the actual damage done over that period of time, and we can see here where all of our damage was being realized. The yellow highlighted lines are where explosions were going on a controller's backpack. This portion was unrealized because of target acquisition. I was looking for a target or moving between a target. These 3 periods of time here correspond perfectly to the 2.2 seconds that it took me to reload the FAMAS during or between targets. Now if we take all of that time and we stack them side by side, remove the target acquisition periods of time, we can see 6.6 seconds reloading and 6.8 seconds doing damage. Now, we're in the building phase. We're currently at 120% crit damage and we currently have a reload speed of 2.2 seconds. 120 is what this build would be if I didn't have a 12% crit damage mod. So I'm deciding between putting on a 12% crit damage mod or putting on 8% weapon handling. Now, the 12% crit damage would add, due to diminished returns, 5.45% to the output for a critical hit. Now, if you actually go back and work out 5.45% additional damage on the critical hits during that period, it would have made zero difference. I would have had to have used exactly the same number of bullets to kill every single target in that mission, in that period. It would have made actually zero difference. But we're going to give it credit for, on average, producing an extra 5.45% damage overall. The weapon handling will reduce reload speed by 8%. It's the first time that we're adding it to the build, so we get the full 8%. The critical hit damage is subject to a realization multiplier, in that it only occurs 59% of the time on average on the current build. And it is an average because if you actually go back and add up all of the critical hits that occurred during that 16-second window of gameplay, it actually worked out to be 48%. But again, I'm going to give it credit that it occurs 59% of the time in the long run. So now we have 59% of the time, the total time that we were doing damage being 6.8 seconds, and then we are saving 5.45% of that time by having the extra 5.45% damage. What that works out to be is a saving of 0.219 seconds. Now in this case it would have been 0 seconds difference, but on average it's going to give us, over that period of time, that window of time, in that real gameplay, it would have been 0.219 seconds quicker with that crit damage mod attached. Now if we go to the weapon handling, 8% reload speed reduction across the 6.6 seconds, or the 3 reloads, is 0.528 seconds. Virtually double what is provided by that 12% crit damage mod. So if you're a burst DPS advocate, you are constantly talking about the fractions of seconds that is saved by having that additional burst of DPS on your weapon or on your build or whatever it may be. I am firmly of the belief that every single build will produce more damage over time by taking into consideration frequency. And here is just one example. And this brings me to the last realization multiplier. And it is by far and away the ultimate, the king, the absolute best multiplier in this entire game, hands down, without any shadow of a doubt. Rounds on target. And why is it the most powerful multiplier? Because whatever potential damage that you think you have in your system, in your build, times 0% rounds on target equals 0 damage. Every single bit of potential damage that you have in your build for an AR is tied up in 2% damage packets distributed throughout the magazine. Now there is something else that is amazing about rounds on target as well. If I was to say that I was at 50% accuracy, so only realizing 50% of the magazine, and let's say that I increased my accuracy from 50% to 60%. It's an extra 5 bullets out of the magazine landing on target. How much have I improved my damage? It's not 10%, it's 20%. Whenever you're reducing from 100% and then trying to get back towards 100% of your damage, you actually experience increased returns instead of diminished returns. As you approach 100%, you are getting diminished returns on your investment, but the minimum that it can possibly be is in fact 2.04%. The last 2%, or that 50th bullet that you add with rounds on target, is still worth more than the value of the 2% that it holds. You are going from 98% to 100%, which represents a 2.04% increase. And the further away from 100 you are, the larger that increase is, until you get to infinity, which is 0 to 2%, or 100% improvement on damage, going from 1 bullet connecting to 2 bullets connecting, or 2 to 4%. On these scales, it doesn't really make much sense. If we reduce this down to just 40% accuracy and moving from right to left instead of left to right, as we would normally add to our build, as you can see, at 50, we are talking about a 4% return on our 2% gain. It's double. And that's what we did. At 50%, we returned double our investment and got 20% improvement on damage. And this is a big deal. This is a massive deal. And in my opinion, it's big enough of a deal that it's time for a new meta. But this is where I'm going to leave you. I'm going to leave you with the task of creating the new meta. And what I want you to do is I want you to come to the firing range. Now, it's a little glitched at the moment, which is disappointing. But what you're going to do is set this to whatever you want. Start at 5 meters. And you are going to record what your accuracy is. At 5 meters. Then what you're going to do is you're going to change it to 20 meters or 15 meters, up to you, whatever you think your average engagement distance is. But I've already shown in engagement distances that exists somewhere between 15 and 20 meters. Go to 20 meters. Whoa, that was bad. And you're going to record your accuracy again. Now, the more that you do this, the better it is. Obviously, the more that you repeat, the better. And what you're going to do is work out what the difference between what you got at 5 meters was and what you got at 15 or 20 meters was. Then you're going to work out what that works out as a multiplier of damage. Then, remember how I said all the way back when we were looking at the variable damage rates and how headshot damage was one of those that I was not taking advantage of and left much of my unrealized damage on the table? What you're going to do is do the process again, trying to go for headshots. Then you're going to work out that difference again. Then you are going to multiply what your improvement in damage was from accuracy, and then what your improvement in headshot damage was. And then work out what that multiplier equals. And it will shock you. There is no multiplier in this game that comes anywhere near close to the multiplier that you have just worked out. And it's because of this fact that I have come to the realization that we have gone about building the wrong way. What we've done is we've created the absolute maximum potential builds that we could possibly create, and we have added tiny little pieces to our build for realization purposes. What I feel is the most effective way, and will probably produce the new meta, is by starting with a build that can realize 100% rounds on target and 100% headshots. There's a couple of ways to do that. One of them is definitely more difficult than the other. The first way, which is more difficult, is to improve your accuracy. Weapon selection, weapon handling, all of those things. But the much easier way to do that is to make a build that allows you to stand 5 meters from the target. Admittedly, the devs may have already done this for us with the creation of the Hunter's Fury build, combining a status effect that reduces damage down to 0. And my next build video probably would have been a Hunter's Fury variation. But there are certainly other ways, and I've proven the effectiveness of this by challenging my friends to races. And I asked them to put on their best damage build that they've got, and I'll race them across 5 missions of their choice. And I'll take the bubble build in. Certainly not the strongest build out there, but its ability to realize damage has meant that I have yet to lose one of those races. Now, the reason why I've been able to win all of those races is not because they were useless and I was better at the game, because that's not the case at all. Some of these people were in fact many hours more invested into this game and definitely better skill level than what I am. But the reason is that I was able to realize more of my damage. They have the potential to do more damage. There is absolutely no doubt about that whatsoever. And in some of those missions, they definitely beat me. But across the long run, I was able to average more realized damage. And in 2 of the cases, 2 out of the 5 times, the member or the person gave up on the race because they actually died. And they died because of the pressure of actually racing. And something caught them off guard, and because they were running a full damage build, unfortunately, they were inside their margin of error, and that error cost them their life. So, this is where I'm going to leave you. I'm going to enjoy watching to see if the meta slowly changes. If we start prioritizing realization of damage over potential damage. And I'm very interested to see what builds you come up with. It's not the bubble build. There's certainly going to be better versions of builds that you can come up with. Somewhere between a high potential damage build and a build that allows you to realize 100% of whatever potential you've got. But the whole point of this series, essentially, and especially this video, is to drive home the point that realization of damage is one of the most important multipliers in this game, and it is the one that is most often overlooked. The best build will be the one that combines potential damage with realization. When you've created your build, throw it in the comments for everybody. Hashtag realization, throw the bill down, and over the next little period I will watch out for those comments, and I'll enjoy seeing what people come up with. Once again, thank you very much for watching. I've appreciated engaging with the majority of you in the comments section. Thanks again to Baz, to Jats, Tux, Dispatch, and for every one of you for watching. And I won't say I won't see you again, but it is definitely goodbye for now. Bog out.